We all know the reason why we are here, to celebrate the ongoing work of Mel King and have a chance to discuss the future of how we can work together in more effective ways to promote the beloved city here in Boston. And so we're delighted that you're here. This is our third annual spring lecture. And in getting started, I just want to take a second to recognize some of the youth organizations that have brought students, high school students, here today. We're just thrilled. The New England Conservancy of Music has an after-school program, which they have students here today. Also, the Youth Option Unlimited is here. We also have our friends from the Mel King Institute, of course, and the Roxbury RCC Community Garden Learning Project, and the Strong Women, Proud Girls Initiative. We also have Leaf Incorporated, folks participating in City Year, individuals who are working at Mel Center, South End Tech Center in the South End, and also the Dorchester College Bound. So I'd like all the youth workers and high school students to just take a moment to stand so we can recognize your hard work and realize that the ongoing work of community building proceeds, and it looks like from what I've learned about your programs this afternoon that it is in good hands indeed. So we're thrilled to have all of you. Thank you for coming. I know it's not easy to get to the UMass Club, and we're just thrilled you're here. Our program is going to be very economical this afternoon. Feel welcome. So we've already hit item number 1 on the agenda. And then second, we just want to take a second to give you a quick update on our graduate program in urban planning and community development, which many of you may or may not know, but it's in its 3rd year. And we are just thrilled by how it's developed. And then we have the great opportunity to hear a recitation of a poem called The Streets, a poem by Mel King that is narrated by folks from the African American Museum here in town, and which is illustrated beautifully by young people participating in an arts program here in Boston. So we're going to show that visual poem, which is just beautiful in so many ways and profound. And then we're going to turn it over to questions and answers featuring Mel. So that's the program. Should we march forward? Yes, okay. So the Urban Planning Community Development Update, as I mentioned, this is our 3rd year. We started with 5 students. We're now up to 30 students. We're just thrilled. Almost all of these folks are working full-time in community development corporations or municipal agencies, medical practices, and we're running the school at night. So we are the night riders at UMass Boston. This May, we'll have our first graduation. We have 8 students graduating. And if you are among those, raise your hand. And this year at graduation, we're establishing 3 permanent awards recognizing heroic community builders from the Boston area. And the first is an award for excellence in professional practice. And this is being given and will be given every year in honor of Jack Wiggin. And our program was established through more than 20 years of effort on Jack's part to get a program, a public planning program up at UMass Boston. And we owe it all to Jack, who's sitting over there. The second award that we'll be giving out each year is for social justice activism for a young person who has used their time and their skills at UMass Boston to make a difference with groups that are often overlooked and marginalized. And that award is going to be given out each year in the name of Marie Kennedy, a longtime faculty member in the College of Public and Community Service, who many of us know. She was involved in urban planning aid and lots of other things. So we're delighted about that. And then the third award, we actually have the person who it's named after is also with us, is for Social Equity Scholarship. Someone who's taking their research focus and looking at inequality and what we can do to move the dial, move the arc of the moral order towards freedom and justice, as Dr. King asked us to do. And that award is going to be given out each year in honor of another CPCS faculty member, Luis Aponte Perez. We are thrilled. The Wigan Award winner is Michaela Niles. Is Michaela here? I know they keep her busy in the Chancellor's office, but that's who's going to get that award. And the second award given out in Marie's name is given out to Noah Augustine for his work with young people and his advocacy around transgender issues and also transportation alternatives. He's the Renaissance man of social justice, and we appreciate that. And then the third award, given out in Luis Aponte Perez's name, is going to be given to, this is at graduation next week or a few weeks from now, Sejani Kandel. Sejani is from Kathmandu. She wants to go back and be involved in efforts to advance resiliency planning that features social equity and redistribution and empowerment of marginalized groups. So we are just thrilled. Can't imagine three better people to honor with these awards and three better people to recognize in terms of their record of social justice work. Since the last time we met, we've accomplished a couple of things. For those of you who are interested in the work of Paul Davidoff, the father of advocacy planning, who looked at issues regarding equity, participation, and empowerment in planning, we have a brand new website called pauldavidoff.com, which has Paul's writings about Paul, interviews with some 24 folks who work closely with him and against him, great photographs and other materials, plans that were done around the world inspired by Paul's equity planning values. So that is up and alive and has been getting an enormous amount of attention globally, and we're very proud of that. Second thing, we've initiated our first neighborhood planning project with Antonio Riccitti, our brand new faculty member from the University of Catania. Somebody told me, gee, the newsletter looks so good, and you're really getting good with PowerPoint. No, Antonio is a master architect, engineer, and urban designer. He's working with the Pope's Hill folks on an anti-displacement, anti-gentrification plan for that South Dorchester neighborhood of Pope's Hill. The third project we're involved in is we'll be sending students for the third year to the Simeto River Valley in Sicily, to work with farmers, environmentalists, municipal officials who are trying to promote sustainable approaches to regional development. We've had 2 or 3 in each of the last 2 years, but this year it looks like we have 10 going. So we are thrilled, and of course Antonio is leading that, and many of the folks, if you're going to Sicily, raise your hand. Not sure, okay. I think maybe I'll go.
What if you want to go?
If you want to go, talk to Antonio. And then we have another project that we've been involved in, thanks to Dr. Ellen Douglas, who's our resident hydrologist. She got us involved in a negotiation or a mediation on a river dam issue on the Exeter River. An old industrial dam the owner wanted to walk away from. Do we keep it? Do we remove it? What's the impact on the surrounding community? And with the help of Michael Monestein, who is here from Central Square Business Improvement District and is also graduating in May, we were able to put together an amazing website called I'll Be Damned or Not. Everything you ever wanted to know about restorative justice on the flowing Exeter River. We'll be starting a new neighborhood planning project in the Highland Park neighborhood, thanks to Randy Foote, who's one of our new students. And then our undergraduates are here as well. We have a new community development program that's moved over into the School for the Environment. Raise your hand if you're in the undergraduate program. Excellent. And this group is working with a hellacious group of African American women from Dade City, Florida, who heard that their county school board was going to surplus the historic African American elementary, middle, and high school and knock it down and sell it on Redfin. And it was being posted. And these women decided that wasn't the best use of this historic space, buildings, and property. So our students in the undergraduate class will be working with the folks from Moore Mickens Neighborhood Association to look at adaptive reuse of the buildings and the surrounding land, and we're very excited about that. As the winter progressed, they wanted to know when the field trip to Tampa was. So this is a very high-minded group we have. And then we've established a number of university exchanges, one with Sapienza University. We have one of their recent graduates doing a postdoc with us, Camilla Ariani over there. And we have, thanks to Alan Wigg, who is another member of our faculty, we have a newest relationship with the School of Architecture at the University of Limerick, which is committed to public architecture, particularly working with new immigrant communities on creation of decent housing and neighborhood-oriented retail, particularly health services. We have an exchange with the University of, the National University of Ireland, Maynooth, and our colleague is up in New Hampshire, so she's not here right now. The University of Memphis is co-sponsoring our summer program at Catania, and then we also have begun doing twice-a-year tours of issues related to housing and economic development with the Chinese Municipal Planning Association. So if you were here for the fall lecture and you were wondering what we were doing to keep ourselves out of trouble, that's what it is. And I'm going to ask Alan if he can pop up, and we're now going to listen to Mel's book of poetry called The Streets.
Streets, 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 streets. From time to time, you have to live in the street. I mean, be alive in the place that is defined by you. Your presence, even for a minute, informs the street. Even though the name hasn't changed, it's not the same. You made it different. Young people on bikes change it and leave a memory. Babies in strollers, in arms or on shoulders, no. From windows, balconies, and steps are eyes that shape the street, as do the sun and moon which shine on the street where I live. This is my street, and I must live my life now, in this moment, as I put one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, going where the street takes me or my life. They are streets of hope that hide despair, some that rise, others that fall, with flowers and trees. Hydrants for cooling, caverns for utilities, sewers for drains to flush the horse manure washed down by the rain. Streets are for games like hopscotch, stickball, kick the can, jump rope, and dodge. Streets are symbols of living. Streets make connection to places and people. Uptown, downtown, crosstown, to bridges, our bridges underground. Street is where we meet, on the sunny side, under lamppost, where lovers stroll. Some streets, there are no sidewalks. Others, brick, cobblestones paved in concrete or asphalt. Others with good intentions. Streets give you identity, make you real, for elections, assistance, and address, so you can be found. Streets have expectations, like demands for uniformity, a way of living, visceral, like in Baltimore, where the steps are painted the same. Streets identify neighborhoods, sometime neighborhoods turf. For the young associations, for the civic-minded, organizers of block watches, flea markets, parties, or fish fries. Rivers, streets, canals, and channels are streets for barges and boats and houses that float, where Otis could sit on the dock of the bay and watch the clouds sail by. Some streets have initiatives like Dudley, where building community power is shared. Some streets have corners with memorials of lives ended too soon, too soon. Streets are where we celebrate saints, the Virgin, and the stations of the cross. Streets are a haven, a host, a place to rest where there's a house with a light and one can be safe, where you learn lessons that shape your life. Streets are where we share our arts and crafts. Streets are where we walk to our neighbors and invite their support. Streets are everywhere you walk or run. Streets lead us to the temple in the mountains when it snows. Streets are where you watch a parade where holiday symbols are displayed for sales and a beat for drummers and police. Rue in France, Calle in Spain, Rua in Portuguese, sometimes called paths or pathways, avenues or lanes, undiminished as alleys or roads, and embellished as boulevards or parkways, linked as causeways, underground and water as tunnels, and hairpin turns around mountains in the sunlight and moonbeams. Streets have signs that help you to know where you are, where you are not. On long trips from the back seats, you hear, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" We're bored. Are there any more games to play? Streets are where a plot of land gets attention, and its growth offers different views. Some weeds edible and attractive. Others are unplanned, still natural and green. And flowers express a neighbor's artistic bent with colors bright to enhance the view. Memories of steps taken before, of visitors from other places. Skid row in the cold, seeking shelter with a bottle on hip. Sometimes shade from the heat of the sun, startled feet marking the quickest route over pressed earth, sometimes red, others brown and white when covered with snow. With signs that say, "Stop and go." Or tell you when you can speed and when to go slow. You don't lead the street, you follow where the street leads you. Street is where you watch fireworks and, perched on the bank's steps applauding the burst of light and colors, the world comes to ooh and ah. In the common language of awe and delight. The words may differ, the meaning in the sound is the same. Street is where someone puts up a net, and there's a volley of balls amid shrieks and yells for the ice cream cart's bells. Double Dutch and Little Sally playing in the water. Roller skates on boards, forerunners of the skateboard. Balloon-tired bikes with coaster brakes by Columbia and Schwinn, with a place for a favorite person to sit. Streets were alive in winter when it snowed. On flexible flyers down our hill we would go. Buck, buck, how many fingers have I got up? The call for choosing sides as our model planes would rise off ground or get launched from a window on the world. Streets have character. There's Basin and Bourbon, the streets of the blues. Fifth Avenue for bonnets and new shoes for dancing all over heaven. Wall for financial news. At Christmas, Salvation Arms for alms. Easter for the thrills on the bonnet. Heartbreak Hill in the marathon. Knob as in cable cars. Sugar as in where you lived, where cows hove to graze in the commons. Institutions like church and school and state as in Massachusetts. Names: Seneca, Oneida, Genesee, Oswego, Chalmette. Give the Indian nations their due. Teammates: Ambrosini, Perella, Melones, Anwar, Goldberg, King. Developed their roots, or was it the root of the rainbow? Formed in a coalition in a campaign for mayor. Some streets have numbers where you get your kicks, like 66, and link Chicago and LA. Other after kings like Charles. Some for flowers like rose, fruits like peach, or nuts like pine. There are streets that define a water like ocean and beach, spring, river, and lake, where a picnic basket with goodies Mom cooked, potato salad, fried chicken. And some streets where your family inflates a pool and you splash. Laugh at the heat from your neighborhood beach. Streets go round about circles called squares when honoring those whose deeds we remember, while pausing for the four-legged animals who made the road before. There are coffee houses where the men hide with water-cooled hashish and tales of old in the midst of dominoes, backgammon, chess, checkers. On benches while outside the dice roll against the curb or building wall. Streets are a venue for prostitutes and hustlers, hawkers and peddlers for rags and bottles. Fresh fish, get your porgies today. Matzahs and ranges as the words faded away. Some came with goodies like roasted chestnuts and popcorn, waffles, melted butter, lemon, slush, and snow cones. Some streets had all you needed. Bakeries with pizza and cat pies, pita bread, bulky rolls, pasteles, and pan de agua. Groceries from everywhere. Matzah, kielbasa, feta cheese, rolled apricot sheets. Delis with pickle and pastrami, pistachio and frozen pudding ice cream. Candy with the cod liver oil from the drugstore. Eel for the holiday wine, whiskey and beer. Needle and thread for repair, Vaseline for skin and the hair, polish for the shoes. Streets were a stage for the organ grinder's monkey to dance to the accordion player's tunes, and the band from South Carolina raised money for their school on streets like Piesto in Rio in summer. The music is cool. You stop, listen, watch. Some are named for places where we were born, like Aguila, or plazas like Betances and San Juan. We paint murals to show life back home and our presence here. Street street is where the art of breakdancing began. So you wouldn't have to fight to show you are better than, or draw the line in the sand. A lesson for all who would heed sharing one's gifts can eliminate the weapons of destruction need. Street is where the turntable became an instrument of change and gave the sounds of music a pulsating range as the spoken word built on Baraka, the Last Poets, and Sanchez unwrapped hip-hop and a cultural change that spread across streets everywhere. Streets are where we listen to orators for causes like Malcolm and Martin, Felix, Angela Davis, the Turners, Nat and Chuck. Joined marches for justice, heard prayers for salvation. From afar, they are paved with gold and viewed as the road to success. Street is where community begins, when all the tribes are welcome. Streets can lead to freedom and joy over land, where Paul rode the road to sound the alarm. Or Harriet Tubman's underground route, where she rescued her people from slavery's harm. Streets provide the new arrival a place to call home, where we gather together to give thanks for our blessings, knowing we have found the street of our dreams. Streets are metaphors where I have come to the end of my road. Street smart and wise can look backward in time, real as the stony road we trod with our weary feet, lifting every voice. Symbolic in stories like Tobacco Road that give a snapshot of some of our lives and where we abode, putting gestures like one for the road. Of course, there are folks who take the high road. Then there's the Silk Road the merchants traveled to peddle their wares. Toll roads and in fables where the troll collects his due for the trucks like Ford built for the road ahead. The public works to keep them moving with earth movers and street pavers. Roads have signs that look out for the deer. Others like the billboard in Tennessee that shows you care, and ways of expression like, a hug is a great gift. One size fits all. And it's easy to exchange. For a poet, street is living by the side of the road, so you can be a friend to all with a light that shines to show the way home.
So poet Mel King, narrator LaMerche Frazier, director of the Museum of African American History, and artwork done by high school and college students participating in the Artists for Humanity program. And Mel does not need an introduction, and we are just going to turn it over to your questions and his responses. So please raise your hand if you'd like to get us started.
So we have a mic, so and we're going to record this, so if you could wait for the microphone to ask your question.
Okay.
You hear me?
Yes.
All right. Let me just tell you why I did that. In the Department of Urban Studies and Planning, MIT, and they have all kinds of conferences and activities, community development, etc. But in the 25 years I'm over there, I said there's something missing, and that there was no focus on streets as centers of our community and our lives. Oh yes, there was how do you make streets or highways that went through neighborhoods or whatever, but in terms of the role that streets play in our lives, nothing. So I decided that I would try to change that, and went out, took photos, talked to some folks about it, etc. And then I said, well, maybe I need to do something with the art and the slides. So I went over and met with the young people at the Artists for Humanity and told them what I would like to see happen, showed them a few slides, and about 3 or 4 days later, they called up and said, come on, we want to show you something. So when I went, they had taken some of the photos and had digitized them and had some ideas. Well, I have to tell you that since most of them were 15, 16, and they were into it, I said, King, you got it right this time. And so we met, and then the people at the Artists for Humanity worked it out with a couple of the folks, and the digitizing of some of the photos that I took, some that I thought of Pamela, who's here, took, were turned into those slides. And then I went and worked on the poetry aspect of it to get the kind of significance in the idea of the impact of streets on our lives. But it was a big part of my growing up and understanding. Growing up on Seneca Street, which was one of what they called the New York streets, until we learned better that Seneca, Oswego, Genesee, those streets were Indian nations, and that, and so they got co-opted by calling them the New York streets. And so I wanted to get that straight with this little slideshow. And one of the things that happened, I was doing a little consulting work out in Seattle, and was in a car driving by and saw a street sign that said Seneca Street. I said, Seneca, that's the street that I grew up on, where I was born. And it kind of reinforced the notion how the Indian nations had an impact across the northern part of the this land. So it just kind of reinforced the notion that the things in where I grew up were of some significance, and I wanted to, as you see, put it together in a way that it really speaks to the value of our streets, the value of our streets. And so, in getting these folks to work on it and put it together, I feel like I accomplished quite a bit in getting streets on record as having the kind of impact on our lives that we don't seem to spend much time thinking about. And so I thought with this, I could get some of the folks interested in doing a lot more about lifting up our streets. So if you want to get up and lift up your street and tell us why, now's the time. And then if you have some questions, we can take some.
Okay. Over here, Miss Jacobs,
Yes.
be graduating in May.
Yes, thank you. So my question is, looking forward for the future, where do you see young people of color assisting in advancing the movement of social justice here in the city of Boston?
On which street?
On all the streets.
Then you just answered the question, right? The issue is how we learn to relate to each other in our block, in our neighborhood, right? It starts there with the home. Now, where I grew up, there were 35 different racial, ethnic, cultural groups right over there in the South End. And because of that, our ways of relating to each other were spectacular. Yeah, we had some struggles at some point, but by and large, an example for me was when the two Armenian sisters got married the same day. All the people on Seneca Street got their mops and buckets out, washed down the street, and they had their wedding celebration right on Seneca Street. That's the way we were on that block and throughout that community. So growing up under those circumstances, we got to know the cultures of many of the groups, and that way had a very positive view of their culture and the strength. The church that we went to was called the Church of All Nations, right? To tell you how many different groups participated, which is how you get to really understand and appreciate what the gifts were that were given to us by the Creator.
Second question, over here, Professor Arches.
I don't, do you really want me?
Probably not. The Chancellor doesn't think so.
So I just wanted to tell the story of when I met Mel in 1988, and it has a lot to do with Charles Street, Waltham. And Mel was running for Congress, and Waltham was still in the district then, and we went over to the Canadian American Club to have Mel speak, but he had been there once before, and there weren't many people there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what should I do? Well, I said, I know what Mel would love and would make a difference. So we went down to Charles Street in Waltham, which was at the heart of the immigrant community there. We walked around, Mel was speaking to everyone. We started talking to them about having a block party, having people celebrate their street, taking pride in their street, and the community had been very discouraged because around that time we had had a new mayor, and supposedly he was really interested in all the different immigrant groups in the communities, and there had been newspaper articles written, and they thought it was all going to be great. And the tone of the article was not so great. It really focused sort of on deficits rather than strengths. And we knew that at that point, and Mel felt strongly, the campaign was not the important part. People owning the street and feeling good about themselves was what's really important. We started a block party there. It's been going on every year. It moved to the Commons. But beyond that, shortly afterwards, people started to find themselves being displaced. They were being bought out by a developer who was gentrifying the area. We started meeting, we were organizing, we were documenting, and we were consulting with Mel. And a year later, we started Waltham Alliance to Create Housing, which was a community development corporation for affordable housing and community economic development, and it still exists to this day. And every time I go down Charles Street, I think of Mel, but it's vibrant. People in the community, somebody had died on that street and he had been an artist. We got the city to repaint the mural, and That's my street story.
Next. Over here, young fellow in the back from the West Side Neighborhood Association, I think. Standing is not necessary.
Hi, my name is Bob Haas, and I live in Dorchester on a street called Monadnock. And I'm not as old as Mel, but when I was in my 20s, Mel came out to my street because even then I was committed to trying to do something about the street. The street is in Upham's Corner, not too far from UMass, and it's a street in a neighborhood that really was slated by the planners to disappear because back in the 1970s we had this phenomenon in a lot of American cities where the bottom dropped out of certain places. And somehow I just sort of loved the street too much to want to let it go. And one thing led to another. I organized a neighborhood association. I, started block parties. I wound up being in a career for 25 years in community development. I was part of Dorchester Bay EDC when I was a founder, and I worked there for 14 years. I was a founder of Dudley Street and Neighborhood Initiative, if you know about that, in Roxbury and Dorchester. And I was part of that, and I'm still part of that. I'm retired, but I'm still working to try to advance the state and the condition of the street. So I want to say to all of you, if you're students, if you love this field, if you love doing this kind of work, consider what street you live in, consider where you're actually located, and how all of these things that you're learning can somehow be applied to what's going on the ground. I've been there on Monadnock Street for over 45 years, and I've written it up because I think this topic, streets, is what it's all about. And I just want to encourage you to think that way and really craft and shape your career that way, of being on the ground and seeing what goes on and seeing who the people are and making connections and friendships and loving people. That's really where it is. Thank you.
Alan, over here, do you have your track shoes on?
He does.
Put that in your faculty annual report.
Hello everyone, my name's Adi Nochur and I work for Walk Boston, and we're working to make streets all over Massachusetts great places to walk and to be in community. And I used to be at the playing program at MIT as well, so great to be here in community with you, Mel. And my question to you is, we see so much a resurgence in our cities these days, so many people moving back to the city, but I question whether they're invested in community the same way you and your community was when you're growing up. You know, all these folks moving into the seaport. I have, it's my perception, I don't think those folks are about to throw down for a block party anytime soon. So my question to you is, as folks are coming back to our cities and reinvesting in our cities, how can we recreate that community ethos so that all of our streets are places where all of us are living and thriving in community together, regardless of our background and where we're coming from? Thank you.
One of the things that we are working on is getting groups to take a look at what is gonna, or what the plans are with the redevelopment authority and the city about what's going on some of the vacant land. And finding ways to get control of that land and working to make sure that the access to it includes the people who are most in need of housing, and those folks usually have limited incomes. We've been meeting with the mayor to get him to put together a program of subsidy, starting with 5 million, and then if the person needs another 60, 70 bucks in order to get an affordable apartment, then we would be able to provide that person with the subsidy. This is our second year. We had a meeting with him a couple of weeks ago, and we're gonna go and continue to push for the access. There are things that we can do, like getting the people who are getting into these high-rise apartments, charging more of a tax on them so that the sums of money that they create can go to meet the needs of people. And that's got to be our number one priority. So you'll hear more about that. We've called for a meeting with the developers, the big people who make most of the money putting up these high rises and others, and we want to get them in the room and really get them to understand the significance of what we're trying to do, which means they have to kick in order to make access realistic for lots of folks. And so one of the roles you can play is do some organizing with folks around what would be the important access for folks so that the loss of Section 8 is not a devastating aspect because there are other resources that are available. And so talk to your city councilors and get them to chime in. Some of them already have, but it'll be important for all of them to know that this is a concern that you have. And as your planners, get into a couple of groups and do some strategizing about what kinds of things could make a difference. You probably have an idea that we haven't thought about, and so don't be bashful about putting it on the table because it may be just the thing that's going to make a difference. And one reason why I like coming here to this and the planning was that it looked like an opportunity to get people into the kind of concerns that will have some new ideas about what we can do in order to make sure that the study by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which said that 30% of the people whose incomes are low will be pushed out of the city of Boston unless we did something significant to challenge and change it. And so that's what we got to be about. And it starts with the streets.
Question over here to our right.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Mel. My name is Magali G. Michael. I am a licensed realtor. So with that being said, I have an interest in every street, on every street within Massachusetts. I will say that one of the reasons why I became a realtor was realizing the discrimination that takes place within the lower to moderate income households, but more importantly, the ignored, or I don't even know what the word is when it comes to Section 8 and the lower to moderate income households and the way that they're being displaced and ignored and belittled and talked down to and so forth. So with that being said, I became a voice for Section 8 recipients as well as the low to moderate income household and started my own nonprofit organization. And also building a lot of enemies within my own profession because I address discrimination head on. And I'm not afraid to say that part of the discriminatory practices that take place within the real estate industry is amongst the licensed professionals that are agents. Because realistically, as you're aware, it's the homeowners that actually dictate how discriminatory practices take place, and the licensed professionals within the real estate industry that actually support and enforces those type of discriminatory practices. And I've been working with the housing authorities as well as the fair housing centers and a slew of different housing people, industries that are within the housing industry. And with that being said, it's definitely, I'm seen as the enemy, but I refuse to be shut down. So with that being said, I would love to know, in your perspective, because I can honestly say, I followed your lead as far as joining the Urban League and becoming the former Boston NAACP housing chair and working with the fair housing centers, so I could really get the scope of where things are coming from and the gentrification that takes place, and becoming a supporter to Section 8 recipients so that they are aware that there are great benefits within the program. More importantly, to be able to utilize their Section 8 voucher to transition into home ownership, because that right there, a lot of people, the funding is available, but no one is taking advantage of it. And it's appalling when someone says that this year we were able to graduate 10 people to transition from Section 8 to home ownership, which is insulting when there are billions of dollars that are going to waste and people are taking advantage of getting the grants and not implementing the resources and the education that is there to actually transition and stop this gentrification. More importantly, it's also about educating our community on how to be a voice for themselves and stop becoming codependent upon somebody to be their own voice. So with that being said, I would love to get your opinion on what else I can do to be the voice, and I already accept the role of being the enemy within my own industry.
You're doing a great job. I would say if you continue to pull together folks in your industry, and we have a couple other groups, we sat down together, we can come up with some strategy that is built on the strengths of each organization. So if we can talk, get your info, we'll get people like Michael King and others to meet with you and take advantage of the breadth of skills you have and what we have on the other side, so that we can meet and put them together. So we'll talk after and set up a time to work together.
Right over here, this young lady in the middle, she looks familiar, vaguely.
Oh, thanks. First of all, shout out to another YP. Hey. But my question, and I guess I'll start with the streets when I'm thinking of my question. So we're going to start off with Warren Street in Roxbury and the fact that Sunny Walker's just closed its doors. We're going to move down to Dudley Square and we're going to look at Dudley Street, where Nubian Notions is no more. And then we're going to go over to Black Market over on Washington, which has been in the news this week because on their opening weekend, someone felt that this amazing store that has lifted up so many Black entrepreneurs in the Roxbury neighborhood to bring in over $400,000 last year to 130 small business owners and minorities would have White Lives Matter painted across the back of it this week before their opening weekend, where Facebook would shut down their business page because it had become a place for people to air their frustrations about what is going on in Boston that no one is talking about, no matter how many Globe series there are. The demographics of the area are changing. What can you help us with, or what advice can you give us to heal some of this animosity that we're feeling from the people who are in the neighborhood who are struggling to stay there, the people who are desiring to come into the neighborhood and maybe aren't as respectful as they should be about what made that neighborhood special, and making sure that there's a balance between those who want to come in and keeping Roxbury what Roxbury is, which is the black heart of Boston.
I'm not sure I can put this together in a way that for me the issue is continuing to work with your group, expand it, and come up with some specifics about some of the land that's available, and come in with a plan for making that affordable for people. But it's also showing up at the different meetings and letting your elected officials know what can work if they do such and such and so and so. And one of them is to push the mayor to put the subsidy program in place, which could make a big difference for 1,000 families or so. And when you do something like that, you begin to turn the pendulum in another direction, and so people have more of a sense of what's possible than if we don't do that. So I think every step and action you take, you've got to publicize and insist that the mayor, Sheila Dillon, those folks come and sit and look people in the eye and get the response that you want. It can be done. We are not looking for a magic wand. This is something that if we keep the will going, the way will come. I have no doubts about it, and so we want to meet with the groups here. This is amazing. This is a program called by the university, and it's brought in some people from the community, and so those of us from the community need to come together and use our collective knowledge, skills, and resources to deal with this issue. We met with the head of the Boston Redevelopment Authority on Tuesday to talk about what was the possibilities for moving resources, etc. And so we're going to continue to do that. It'd be great to get some of the groups here in the meetings with us as we go to challenge the council and the owners of some of these properties. But the bottom line for me is that we have to insist that all city-owned property be used for folks whose incomes are low, as a way of making sure that they can still remain in the city. We have the resources, they're there, and if we put it together, we can do that. There are some interesting possibilities. One of my former students is out in Seattle, and she pulled together some groups and they make what they call these tiny houses. Tiny houses. Tiny houses. And it's very interesting because they could put them on a church property, right? And get half a dozen families into a good situation. We're not doing enough to push the churches to move some of those automobiles away from there so that they can use some of that land for housing. When the program at Long Island closed, we raised it with the churches, and it was only the Old South Church that came through with giving space for that. So we need to also stay on the churches, stay on the mayor. Do not hesitate to find the developers and insist that they come and meet with us and be part of solving this problem.
Over here on the left.
Professor King, I'd like to say thank you. I am actually one of your former students from DUSP 20 plus years ago, and I'll share a brief story. I'm the manifestation just one of what Mel was trying to do at MIT. So I'd gotten accepted to MIT, I'd gotten the phone call and they fly you in. And I quickly learned as I was talking to the other students who had been admitted that they had gone on and accepted. I had not. Prior to coming up to Cambridge, I had done my due diligence. I was coming from Tuskegee, Alabama, and at that time, community development corporations were emerging. So I figured, let me come to a mature market and understand how the community development sector works, and then I'll return to Alabama. But what was critical in me accepting the acceptance that MIT offered me was coming over and talking to Mel and getting his blessing that it made sense. So I was able to find a break in the day, made my way over to South End Technology Corporation. We sat down and we chatted for several hours. We talked about your time in South Carolina, and you pretty much gave me the green light and said, sis is good, come learn. So my entire time at MIT, I would leave the campus. I actually lived in Dorchester, which was very different from my colleagues who chose to live in Cambridge. I got my apartment in Dorchester in Codman Square. I worked at 2 different community development corporations, Codman Square and Mattapan, and I made it my business to leave class and always spend my time under the tutelage of Mel, because he was putting it in action. So sir, I thank you. I thank you, and I actually share with my students. I came up from Rhode Island, I meandered my way back into higher education, and I studied something called anchor institutions. And there are 3 things that you taught me. And the first was that this work is about inspiration and aspiration, but most importantly, it's about perspiration. You should be working, trying to make a change. You also taught me, and this is what I try to impart to my students, about being disruptive. You must disrupt. You must challenge systems. You must get in the way. And the third thing, which is probably the most important, was that you taught me that fundamentally at the base of this work is about common humanity. And making sure that in all of my work, I work to dismantle this artificial hierarchy that we have created. So, sir, thank you so much.
No, she gets the applause because she's followed through and doing the work.
We have a hand up here in the middle.
I was inspired by your book, Chain of Change. And in that book, you called for, this is in the mid-'80s, for really a systematic organizing, particularly in communities of color in Boston. And you talked about resident leadership and promoting that. You talked about communities that would know what their priorities were and be able to plan for that. You talked about connecting across communities for collective power. And then, you know, James Jennings from Tufts did a study, it was somewhere around 2009, and said that there are about 40 distressed census tracts in Boston out of the 150. And something like 80% of them were in Roxbury, Mattapan, and Dorchester. So what I'm wondering, and I've been doing some community work myself in Cobham Square last 4 years, is I really am inspired by that vision of deep community capability within and across communities. But 30 years later, other than some, you know, represent some very powerful evidence in some neighborhoods like Dudley, it doesn't seem, that vision doesn't seem to have grown the way I think a lot of people would like to have seen it. And I'm wondering what your perspective is on that.
I'm not sure, because we have, and some of the names escape me, one of the age problems, organizations that are trying to hold on and expand. And the ideas that we have are getting more of the people involved in the discussions at the city level with a focus on the people who are in need and changing the conversation in some ways to who's most in need. And we need to continue to do that. But also, the need to bring the community organization folks together to really try to understand what's happening. There's a strip that connects, was it Tremont and Columbus Ave over there, that there's been all kinds of confusion about what is going to happen on that strip. And it seems to me that some of what we need to do is to get clear within the community what we're really going to stand up for, etc. Because there is some division in terms of who people want to work to have access. And for me, it's always been, as you do for those folks with the least, you do for everybody, okay? And for me, it says a rising tide lifts all boats, but as you get to the folks who are most in need, everybody goes up, because you know in your soul you have reached out to the aspect of our culture and the aspect of who we are, to make sure that the people most in need are dealt with first, and that everybody else rises with them. And we have to get people to stop thinking that that they are brought down by people in need. No. When you lift them up, everybody begins to see the love and the value that comes from doing the right thing by people who are most in need. And that's got to be where we are. You know, the title of my book, Poems, is Love is the Question and the Answer. And there's something about self-definition. I spoke at a rally where some of the newcomers to the city were holding in East Boston a few years ago. And they had a sign there that says, we are a nation of immigrants, all right? And so I asked them to take the sign down and to change it and put up a sign that says, we are a nation of new neighbors. I got applauded in 5 different languages, right? Right? Now you're gonna understand that. You change the focus to neighbors, that the people there are your neighbors. And that as when you do that, you have changed it from the fact that you're dividing people by where they came from, etc. You're doing this because you want for your neighbor the best that you want for yourself. And so I think that's a piece of the language we need to be talking and sharing. How do we bring out the best in each of us? And it starts with believing that there is the kind of love that's available for all. And so when I say love is the question and the answer, I take that to mean you're looking out for all folks when you're practicing the meet the needs of people who are the neediest.
Over here.
How are you? I'm Marvin Robinson. This is a very, very big year for me, 2018. Some 42 years ago, I met this king in a program in Cambridge in City and Regional Planning. I was the mathematics, drafting and design undergrad with hopes and dreams of wanting to be architect and a planner. I became a teacher, and I'm a retiring teacher from New York City and Boston. I really am inspired by the poem, and you said streets, because I've always favored streets. I'm a city person, love the city. Richmond, New York, Paris, streets in Burundi, I love them. And I got that inspiration starting here at a town hall meeting when I met a gentleman who was very involved on the other side of the Charles River. And he was very, very, very articulate and passionate about what he was doing. I wanted to be like that. And I had inspiration from others too, but I am pointing out this gentleman here, this king. I met a king in Africa. I met a president in France. The street gave me that inspiration in those places that took me back to a childhood where there was a street of African Americans who had their church, had their laundry, had their shoe shops, had their barbers, had their clubs, had had their homes on this street. The women went to church with their wonderful hats. They sung glorious songs. It was Southern. It was wonderful. And I came to this city with an inspiration that, I'm going to build something like that. Politics, I never thought about. I was the artist. I became the teacher to help students, young people, with those desires and trying to influence them to become architects and urban planners and getting involved in the city. in their city. I must say that after 42 years, I saw the internet website about this event, and I wanted to come here to put a cap on what started 42 years ago. Thank you.
Over here on the left.
Hi, Mr. King. I just wanted to say what a blessing and a privilege it is for you to be here, for me to be here. Thank you so much for all of us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. I just wanted to know what are some of the most significant lessons that you've acquired over your long and successful career? Sorry, what are some of the most significant lessons that you've learned over your career?
Well, one of the things that I keep coming back to, if I get the author's name right, there was a book called The Right of Revolution. And is that Stringfellow? I think so. In any event, coming back from college in the South, and then starting to work on youth work, which then led to working to challenge the agency and the redevelopment authority. There was always this thing about the right of revolution that struck me, that we had the right to alter and to change. And that that was just something that still I hang on to, that you have an idea in which the goods and resources of the gift of creation to be for all and not for just a few. And that with that, the struggles that we've been in have led to that. One of the things that came out of that consciousness was the tent city, where we took over the parking lot. And yeah, we got arrested, but it was an important aspect of understanding the importance of a revolution. And I'd always been fascinated by how that made a difference in this country in terms of its dealing with England at that point. And so the thing that I want to get to is that we know, every one of us knows when we are at a point where we say, this is going to lift everybody up, and that's what I'm going to try and do. Okay? So when we had the tent city thing and we took over the lot, some of us got arrested. I don't know that I had felt better about anything than knowing that we were challenging a situation and that we knew we were right in terms of the political perspective that said that the people should be the ones who could make the decision about the land use. It turned out that the city had been lying. How so? They did not let us know that the urban renewal law said that there had to be an elected committee in each urban renewal district that made the decisions. And so when we learned that, we fortunately had a couple of city councilors, Tom Atkins, for one, who were able to follow the federal law and push the city to do the right thing. And the right thing was letting the people in the district make the decisions about what was going to go on. And Tent City and a lot of the housing that has mixed income in it, in this city, started with the fact that when the people in the South End realized that they had to vote to decide what kind of housing would be available. And so we ended up with the tent city with 25, 50, 25, and somebody mentioned earlier, some of the folks in that 50 were able to save money as they grew and they could purchase, etc. And the model which we use then works all the time, and that we can see how you get stability in people, and then they're able to figure out what their next steps are going to be. And so I'm trying to talk again, and I'm going back to the subsidy with the mayor, again, to say, you put the process on the line and people understand it, and that's where we should go. And so we're going to keep on. We need your assistance to push the city to wherever they own a piece of the land, that it has to have the inclusion of people whose incomes are low, so they can have a chance to get stability and then grow. And we can do that. And you're going to hear more about that in the next few weeks and months, etc. So stay tuned and get ready to participate.
We'll maybe have time for 2 or 3 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Randy, and then we'll go to Symbol.
Mel, it's a pleasure to see you again. I remember, like you talking about Tent City, in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, when Boston was a declining city, a not wealthy city, efforts that you were making and other people like Chuck were making about actually standing up to the BRA, standing up to the city, and having real success. Now that Boston is a much wealthier city with a lot of money coming in, it seems much more difficult to actually have that kind of success with the city, and I really appreciate hearing what you're talking about. Roxbury has more vacant land than any part of the city, and D&D is looking, affordable housing means 80% of area median income, which is about twice the median income of a family in Roxbury. I have a sense that all the various kinds of groups in Roxbury and Dorchester in the city, of which there are many, need to come and work more closely together instead of each in their own little areas, and to try and recreate that kind of unified action that I remember from a number of years ago. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, obviously that's an important part of the process, is to get the folks most affected to participate. And there are efforts in Roxbury as we speak to make that happen. And You talk again with Chuck Turner, with some of the folks. They are working on it. And I think in the next few months, you'll see and hear something about the results of the work that they're doing as we speak.
Over here in the second row, this young lady.
Hello, thank you for being here, Mr. King. My name is Simbal, and I am a part of the UMass Boston's undergraduate class for community economic development. And we're working on a project with a community in Florida that none of us have actually been to. And my question is, how is it that we can, or how do we enter a community that we are not a part of and show ourselves as allies and help them on their project?
Which one? One in Florida?
Yes, the Mormons one in Florida.
Well, what kind of contact have you with some of the people in need?
So the contact has been actually through our professor, Professor Reardon. He's the one that has talked to us about the community and what the community looks like. We know it's a school, and we're doing an adaptive reuse project with the school. And my specific project that I'm working on with my group is to create a human development center, so a daycare and an elderly daycare as well, so they can have an intergenerational development center on site.
And what's stopping you?
Absolutely nothing.
So when is it going to open?
Excuse me?
When is it going to open?
We're still planning it. We're going to pitch our ideas and do presentations the final week of class.
Who are you pitching it to?
The ladies that are working with the nonprofit and the development team, yes.
All right, well, let us know the results.
Okay, no final burning question. Just a couple of small housekeeping notes. First, I just wanted to thank Mel's wife, Joyce, and his daughter, Pamela, who gave me a gentle phone call 2 weeks ago to make sure I was ready to take care of Mel. And I hope we met the standard. And for many, many years, those of us who've been in and out of Boston have known that Joyce and Mel have opened their house on Sundays for very famous pancake breakfasts in which folks who had burning desires to move the arc of the moral order towards justice would get together, exchange ideas, support each other, challenge each other, and that's been an extraordinary tradition. I didn't hear about it when I was at UMass Amherst or in Boston. I heard about it when I was working in East St. Louis, Illinois. And 2 graduates of the Urban Fellows program who were responsible for taking the University of Illinois' outreach program to the proverbial woodshed. They asked great questions about what was a colonial approach to community outreach that really didn't respect the voices that were so articulate and present in that great city, led by people like Catherine Dunham and others. I asked them, I said, gee, you seem to be quite knowledgeable about this whole planning thing. And they both snickered and they said, well, we went through the Urban Fellows program with somebody named Mel King. And I knew everything was going to be okay. And they talked about their famous breakfasts, and they replicated that in East St. Louis, next to the home of the great Catherine Dunham. And so that tradition lives on in the Midwest and all those people who sat around that breakfast table. The other thing is I wanted to thank my old college dorm mate, Janice Goldman, for being our link to Mel and helping us get everything organized in a reasonable way. And she's from the School of Management at UMass Boston. So, you know, if you just think that management is all the dark side, it's not true. There is some progressive light. I don't know how they let Janice in there, but they seem to like her over there. And then the last thing I just want to say as we wrap up, and we are just so profoundly grateful to have the King family here with us, at least a portion of it. We know there's great representations in other places, is that some of the most inspiring moments we've had in the short history of our program, the graduate program of the School for the Environment, with the urban planning program, and the undergraduate program, which we've just brought over from the College of Community and Public Service, have been when our students have been exposed to the ideas, examples, and prophetic voice of Mel King. So I know it's been very emotional for many of our students and for me that we can continue in some small way this extraordinary legacy of training people with humility to stand as respectful allies with grassroots leaders who are gaining voice on critical justice issues. And we have just such a terrific example that we will hold close to as we move through our careers. And I am going to give Mel, of course, the last word.
I want you to repeat, teamwork makes the dream work.
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 Teamwork makes the dream work, and we're gonna be a what?
A team.
All right, so we get to work.
That was great. Water? Wasn't that wonderful?
Can you do me the honor of signing?
And there are copies of Chains of Change and also the Streets, and if you don't buy them, poor families